what you think, what you telling your friends when you're talking about me. It's cool, you can say what you want to. I don't give a fuck what you think.
Ivan IV, Ivan the Terrible, Tsar of Russia, 1533 to 1584. In the dark heart of 16th century Russia, Tsar Ivan IV, later known as Ivan the Terrible, ruled with an iron fist and a heart full of unrelenting rage. The legend of his cruelty began early in his life, as he witnessed the brutal death of his beloved mother at the hands of the boyars. This early trauma shaped him into a maniacal ruler, bent on crushing any opposition, real or imagined. By the time Ivan ascended the throne at the age of 3, his mind was already teetering on the edge of insanity. As a young czar, he was driven by a need for absolute control, and soon, his paranoia began to dictate his actions. He ordered the creation of the Oprichnina, a secret police force tasked with rooting out traitors. This terrifying group was known for torturing and executing anyone suspected of being disloyal, and they did so without mercy. It was during this time that Ivan ordered the massacre of Novgorod in 1570, where his soldiers slaughtered thousands of people, accusing them of treason. Women, children, and the elderly were not spared as the blood flowed through the streets. But the true horror of Ivan's reign came with the murder of his own son, Ivan Ivanovich. In a fit of rage, Ivan struck his son in a violent argument, leading to a fatal blow. This moment sealed Ivan's reputation as a tyrant. He became isolated, haunted by the ghost of his son and the souls of all those he had sacrificed. It's said that his final days were spent in a state of madness, where he was haunted by the screams of the people he had slain, never finding peace, forever tormented by the blood on his hands. Genghis Khan, founder of the Mongol Empire, circa 1162 to 1227. In the unforgiving land of the Mongolian steppes, a young boy named Temujin would rise to become one of the most feared men in history, Genghis Khan. His early life was marked by hardship, as he witnessed the brutal murder of his father, a tribal leader, and was cast out by his own people. But Temujin was no ordinary man. Driven by an insatiable thirst for power, he united the Mongol tribes under his banner and began a relentless campaign of conquest that would change the course of history. The stories of Genghis Khan's cruelty are legendary. It is said that when he captured a city, he would order the execution of the entire population. His forces were known to destroy entire civilizations, leaving nothing but ruins and death in their wake. The Mongols laid waste to cities such as Nishapur and Samarkand, slaughtering tens of thousands. One of the most horrifying tales was the siege of Nishapur in 1221, where Genghis Khan's army killed hundreds of thousands of civilians, burying them alive and leaving their bodies to rot in the streets. As Genghis Khan's empire expanded, so did his reputation for ruthless efficiency. But even in the face of this unimaginable destruction, he did not stop. It was said that his enemies trembled at the mere thought of his approaching armies. By the time of his death, he had carved out the largest contiguous empire in history, spanning from the China to the edges of Europe. But his legacy is not only marked by military brilliance but by the countless lives lost at his command. Vlad III, Vlad the Impaler, Prince of Wallachia, 1448, 1456 to 1462, 1476 to 1477. In the dark hills of Transylvania, a figure would rise from the shadows, his name forever linked to blood and terror. Vlad III, known to the world as Vlad the Impaler, ruled the Principality of Wallachia in the 15th century. His reign would become one of the most brutal in history, and the methods he employed to maintain control were as savage as they were horrifying. Vlad's signature method of execution, impalement, became his trademark. He would impale his victims on long wooden stakes, leaving them to die slowly and painfully, their bodies often left on display to terrorize his enemies. It is estimated that tens of thousands of people were impaled during Vlad's reign. One infamous story tells of a group of merchant traders who angered him. In retribution, he ordered them to be impaled alive in a gruesome display of power. But it wasn't just his enemies who felt his wrath. Vlad was known for his cruelty even toward his own people. Women, children, and the elderly were also among his victims. The smell of death hung heavy around his castle, and it is said that the crows gathered to feast on the corpses that dotted the landscape. Despite his gruesome actions, Vlad was seen as a defender of Christendom against the Ottoman Empire. His legend lived on, inspiring the character of Count Dracula. But the true terror of Vlad the Impaler remains in the blood-soaked history he left behind, a man who ruled by fear, leaving behind a kingdom of ghosts. Joseph Stalin, leader of the Soviet Union, 1924 to 1953. In the heart of the Soviet Union, one man ruled with an iron fist, Joseph Stalin, a dictator whose name is forever associated with oppression, terror, and death. Stalin's reign was defined by the Great Purge, a series of brutal purges that saw millions of people arrested, tortured, and executed for perceived disloyalty. Stalin's paranoia drove him to eliminate anyone he saw as a potential threat, and his show trials were staged to justify the execution of his enemies. The Gulag system became a tool of control, with millions sent to forced labor camps in Siberia, where they were worked to death in the harshest conditions. But the most horrifying aspect of Stalin's rule was the Holodomor, a man-made famine that struck Ukraine in the early 1930s. Stalin's policies of forced collectivization led to the starvation of millions, as grain and food supplies were seized by the government to fuel the Soviet war machine. Stalin's brutality didn't stop at political enemies. Entire families were torn apart, and anyone who dared question his regime faced swift and brutal punishment. It is said that Stalin died a paranoid man, unable to trust even those closest to him. His final days were spent in isolation, haunted by the ghosts of his victims. His legacy remains one of terror, suffering, and death. Adolf Hitler, Führer of Nazi Germany, 1933 to 1945. In the darkness of World War II, a man named Adolf Hitler rose to power, promising to reshape the world according to his twisted ideology. Hitler's reign was built on hate, violence, and the belief in Aryan supremacy. Under his leadership, Nazi Germany began a campaign of ethnic cleansing that would lead to the Holocaust, the systematic murder of 6 million Jews and millions of others deemed undesirable by the Nazi regime. But it wasn't just the mass exterminations in concentration camps that defined Hitler's terror. His military aggression sparked the deadliest conflict in human history, resulting in the deaths of tens of millions. As his army swept across Europe, cities were destroyed, and entire populations were forced into labor camps or executed. In his final days, as the war turned against him, Hitler retreated to his bunker in Berlin. Surrounded by the ruins of his empire, he descended into madness, unable to accept defeat. Some say that even in death, Hitler's spirit lingers in the ruins of Berlin, forever tied to the devastation he caused. His reign remains one of the darkest chapters in history, a reminder of the horror that can result from unchecked hatred and absolute power.